Thank you very much. That's a marvelous introduction. It's super. I don't know if I can live up to it, but it's great. I tell you, this convention is a great convention. I mean, it's really unusual. I'm not just saying it because it's another convention I attended, because there are two unique things about it. One, for Libertarian Party conventions. One is, today is the first time, today and tonight, I heard a Libertarian Party official at any convention call for more members. That's fantastic. It's an unusual situation. You might think it's puzzling why it's unusual. That's an interesting question. Why indeed? Actually, welcoming and calling for new membership. That's a great spirit in itself. There are too many parties, and I'm not going to mention the names in order to protect the guilty. There are many state parties which don't want to grow in membership. They feel we have enough members. We have 20 members. Why do we need more? Rather strange attitude. And the second great thing about the Michigan convention here is that the first convention I remember since the 1970s. I've attended every national convention since 1975. And there are many state conventions, not every one, but many. It's the first convention since the 70s which focuses on ideas of liberty and how you apply it to the real world. The first time. It's a very unusual situation, so I applaud that. It's just great to talk about ideas. What else did they talk about? I don't know. But so I hope this sparks a trend of returning to talking about ideas at Libertarian Party conventions. Okay, I'll start with just as a general. One question always comes up, which has often come up at any rate. What's the purpose of the Libertarian Party? I keep getting questions like, should our purpose be to get more votes? Should it be to win elections? Should it be to spread ideas? I never understand the dichotomy here. I always figured all of the above is my answer. That's the whole point. We grow in membership, advance the ideas, get more votes, and eventually get elected and mold back the Leviathan state. That I figure is the whole point of the exercise here. So I can never understand why there should be any kind of split in this in these aims. It seems to me that the ultimate purpose, of course, of the Libertarian Party is the political action arm of the Libertarian movement, and it's the arm which applies libertarianism to politics and electoral politics. And the idea is eventually to roll back the state, and this is our method of doing it. It seems to me that the basic strategy we should employ is to, and this again is a question that always comes up, what sort of strategy? It seems to me the basic strategy is to keep the ideas aloft of our ultimate goal, ultimate principle, and try to achieve them and try to get toward it as fast as possible. This would seem to be almost banal, but it seems to be a controversial in the movement. There are two. The Marxists work this out. The Marxists are very good strategic theorists. As a matter of fact, before they started collapsing about a few years ago, they spent most of their time arguing about strategy, not about principle or whatever, but simply how to approach, how to change the world, how to take a situation which they were very much opposed to and how to bring about a very different one. And the Marxists identified two basic deviations, so to speak, two basic erroneous strategies, and I would endorse this with, of course, a different twist. One is what they call opportunism, which I think is often rampant in the movement. And what happens there, I've seen this happen in many libertarian organizations, because I've been around the movement for about 43 years I've been a libertarian. Good God. At any rate, what happens is, your goal is to advance the ideas of liberty. That's the objective, okay? And you want to do it as rapidly as possible and as effectively as possible. And so you try to build an organization which will accomplish that. And what begins to happen, sometimes very quickly and other times after a long period of time, it begins to happen as a subtle or sometimes sudden shift of emphasis. So the ends become the means become the end. In other words, the objective, which had been advancing liberty, now becomes keeping the organization going, keeping the payrolls going. And so, then you change the output in order to maximize your input, so to speak. So the ends and means are transposed. As my friend Wally Harper used to say, one of my early mentors in the movement, that is when the organization takes on the dimensions of a racket. You claim you're advancing freedom. Instead of that, you're simply building your own salaries. So that's one problem that keeps popping up. Only eternal vigilance and realizing the problem, I think, can stop it. The other problem is sort of the opposite problem, which is Marxists called sectarianism. In other words, only saying, okay, we want only talking about the ultimate goal and never talking about any kind of transition to it. I think the best, most extreme example of that is the old, fairly lovable socialist party called the Socialist Labor Party. I don't know if anybody here has heard of it. For good reason, nobody's ever heard of it. But at any rate, the Socialist Labor Party has been in existence since about 1890 or so. They've gotten no place, and their strategic outlook is simply to publish one pamphlet. And the one pamphlet has different headlines. They keep up to date. Their outreach program is to change the title. In other words, they'll say, "Are you worried about? Are you worried about nuclear war, pollution, unemployment, whatever the situation is?" Then they reprint the same pamphlet, and the answer is socialism. Scrap capitalism and on to socialism. That's it. It's the pamphlet. So it hasn't been very effective. It doesn't really grab. It's not a grabber. Okay. And there are a lot of libertarians, I think, who tend to have that same emphasis. Okay, smash the state. That's it, and without any kind of intervening analysis. Okay. Well, how do we? So what do I think is the correct strategy, so to speak? I think the correct strategy is to hold the ultimate goal objective, always keep it in mind, and then offer what the Marxists call transition programs. Okay. So the transition program to a taxless United States is abolishing the income tax. It's a good, solid transition program. Go for that. Been willing to live with that for a few years before pressing on. So that's the transition program. However, there are a couple of criteria, important criteria for transition program. One, it should be consistent with the objective, with the goal. Okay, I think it's very important. This is what liberals mean when they say the means should not contradict the ends. I think it's clumsily worded, but basically it's that you advance a transition program. It shouldn't undercut the ultimate objective. So you don't, for example, if you want to abolish the income tax, you don't say we should have a huge sales tax, because first of all, usually happens you have both. You wind up with both. See, our objective is not to help the state along and try to advance this program. Our objective is to try to whittle it down. Okay, so that's one thing. Should any proposals advance should not contradict the ultimate objective. The second thing, the means should be pretty radical. Okay, the transition program shouldn't be so moderate that everybody snoozes off. I have a couple of examples from the early days of the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party really first flourished in New York City, the heartland, of course, of libertarianism, as we all know. With a stunning mayoralty race in 1973, Fran Youngstein got 9,000 votes or something, which was great for that time. And so, buoyed up by this resurgence, they decided to run for governor the next year. Jerry Tuccilli ran for governor. They decided on a soft core program because they really thought they were going to either win or at least get a lot of votes. You have to appeal to the public. Soft core program. So Tuccilli, I forget who the other turkeys were who ran against them, Democrat or Republican. But at any rate, it was 1974, and Tuccilli's great radical program was we should cut taxes. Cut state tax. Well, big deal. I mean, both the Republican and Democrat also said the same thing. So we were stuck with a situation where you have the Republicans and Democrats both saying we should cut taxes. Taxes are too big. And meantime, this radical, crazy new party also says the same thing. What's the point of voting for the radical, crazy new party if they don't offer any alternative? Okay, so naturally, it was a big flopperoo and lots of hysteria coming out of it. And Tuccilli left the party shortly thereafter. A disillusioned, broken man. And the New York Party has been declining ever since. I mean, every year it gets fewer votes. But at any rate, there's no point in selling out in that manner because you don't offer an alternative. There's no point in pulling for 2% income tax cut, things like that. There were many great things about the Clark campaign in 1980, but the content was not one of them. The content was Clark offered the big centerpiece of the Clark campaign, which is very well funded, and a lot of TV ads, which you haven't had since. The centerpiece of the Clark campaign was a 30% income tax cut. Unfortunately, Reagan was saying the same thing. He was also offering a 30% income tax cut. The question is, if a Republican who has a good chance to win offers a 30% cut, and a Libertarian who's a crazy new party also says we're in favor of a 30% cut, who's the average anti-tax person going to vote for? Well, the answer is obvious. Ain't us. So that's the sort of thing. We have to offer a clear-cut, radical alternative to the existing system to give people a reason to vote for us, to break their habits of a lifetime and vote for some kooky new party. Okay, so that's, I think, the strategic guidelines there. So the Libertarian Party, now I begin to get to the controversial stuff of the speech. Libertarian Party has what I consider a great platform. It was built up over many years. I'm one of the architects of it. I was on the platform committee for many years. And we built it up as specifically to take our principles, which are our great principles, and apply them to political issues. Okay? Because to make the connection, and just say you're in favor of freedom is not enough. It's great, it's fine, but it's only the first step. Okay, you guys are in favor of freedom. How do you apply it? Okay, here's where we apply it. Bing, bing, bing. Well, this upset a lot of people, including many libertarians, and it's a constant call for either getting rid of the platform, which is almost impossible to do because the way the bylaws are structured, once the thing is frozen in the platform, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. And the other proposal, which unfortunately carries, to have a program, which is a short platform, which essentially is an end run around it, to appeal to the average person because the platform is considered too radical. So what you have, you're beginning to get something like a 2% income tax cut. In other words, you're beginning to get to the point where who cares anymore. So that, I think, should be combated. I think the platform is a great platform, and I urge you all to read it. That's true. See, the complaints are that it's too long. It's much shorter than the Republican and Democratic platforms. Believe me, those are a couple hundred pages apiece, and this is still fairly short. One of the things which has puzzled me for a long time, I've not received an answer yet. I'm open to any kind of suggestions. I'm not open to many things. This is one of the things I'm open to. And that is, why is it that the voters apply a much different standard to us than they do to the Democrats or Republicans? They vote for the Democrat or Republican, well, this guy's a little bit better for him. Yet with us, they say, well, you have 100 positions, I disagree violently with one of them, therefore I won't vote for you. Why do they do that? Why do they have to agree with every damn one of the planks until they vote for us? I still don't understand this. Maybe psychobabble has a place after all, kind of explain this. Gene Burns, who was a sometime candidate for president, I think he was just a great candidate. Unfortunately, things happened and he never continued to be nominated to the nomination. He has a great concept. By the way, he's one of the greatest speakers I've ever heard bar in any party. Anyways, his concept was a freedom train concept, which I think is terrific. Namely, he said this, of course, much better than I do. So he's a radio talk show host, and he's a great voice. He said, basically, look, if you don't agree, we have a freedom train. We're going on the way to freedom. I invite you to get on the train. If you don't like after we go 80% of the way, or 60% or 90%, you're free to jump off or get off at any time. But join us in the meantime. I think it's a great metaphor, and I think it's terrific. I'm sorry they didn't continue the nomination. Anyway, so I think that sort of thing might be a good answer to this. Nobody wants you to agree 100% of the things. I mean, it'd be great if you did, but we don't require it as a condition for voting for us. Okay. I think, to get to another point here, about the case for the free market and the case for liberty and the case against statism, I think it's very important to do two things. One, to refute the intellectual content. It was to show that statism doesn't work. That's great. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. I do it most of the time. But there's something else which I think is also important, namely to show it's not just intellectual error. Okay, this is where I agree with the public choice people. It's not just intellectual error. People aren't that dumb. A lot of people benefit from this stuff. We have to expose the fact that they are ripping us off. And one of the advantages of this is it gets people hot under the collar, as they should do. In other words, if you say, well, the farm price support program is a beautiful example of this. It doesn't work. It's irrational, etc., etc. It's all true. It hurts the consumer. People will say, yeah, okay. And they sort of walk off. They don't really care that much. It's like my students or anybody else has students in the classroom. But if you say they're ripping us off, these are a bunch of thieves, they're looting our pocket, then they start, they pay attention, they're interested. It rouses them from their usual torpor. And so the moral argument is actually an extremely important one, even from utilitarian grounds. For example, take the farm price support program, okay? Farm price support program is, quote, irrational, unquote. It's the old way of looking at it, okay? You pay, the taxpayer pays the farmer, taxpayer is fleeced, The government pays the farmer to produce less, or sometimes not to produce at all. And then supply goes down, prices go up. If the cheese or whatever it is stored in some warehouse for many years. In addition to all of that, the Department of Agriculture is also paying farmers to produce more, increase their productivity, to irrigate, in the old days to electrify, to increase fertilizer. So it seems totally crazy. Why is the government paying the farmers, one, to produce more, and two, to produce less? Okay? It's irrational from the point of view of the consumer, from the point of view of the economic system. It's not irrational, however, from the point of view of two groups. One, the big farmers, who get paid to produce more and to produce less. That's great. They love it. Two, the Department of Agriculture increases bureaucracy tenfold to run these programs. Okay, so we have a cozy coalition between the Department of Agriculture and the large farmers. They are ripping us off. I think this sets this thing at a historical point better than simply a sort of a logical critique of the program. In addition to that, okay, this brings me to my question of outreach, which of course is always every libertarian's lips. And actually, I'm in favor of everybody voting for us, okay, without exception. But then the question: who do you target? I mean, we don't have unlimited resources. Which issues do you concentrate on? Which groups do you try to get in? And I think the basic thing is you try to concentrate on people who are, in some way, are outraged at government, some aspect of government action. It's an anti-government coalition I think we're trying to build. In other words, it's not a coalition with Dan Rather. Not that I hate Dan Rather. The idea is not to convert Dan Rather. I think it's a hopeless task. Although anybody who wants to do it is free, of course, to do it. Or to convert the establishment, or convert the Reagan administration or the Bush administration. I think it's a terribly mistaken kind of strategy. The idea is to convert people who already hate the government for one reason or another. Okay? This puts us in a very different kind of focus, very different kind of footing. It also means we're probably going to be less respectable. Interest in respectability, this is not the kind of program to push. For example, one of the outrageous things happening right now is a sellout of President Bush on gun control. And President Bush, lifetime member of the National Rifle Association, allegedly opposed to gun control. As soon as the crunch comes, which means anything at all, as soon as somebody uses a gun to shoot somebody, bingo, yeah, we have to restrict imports of guns and all the rest of it. So this is a powerful program for the people out in the boonies. Okay, I admit it's not a good program for urban America. In New York City, if you argue against gun control, you're a minority of 1, 2, or 3, or whatever it is. Well, so what? This is correct. Okay, you have a large number of people out there in the non-urban areas who hate the guts of gun control, and will get their votes and support. And of course, you make the philosophic case. You can't be in favor of gun control and also be in favor of any other aspect of private property rights and freedom and all the rest of it. So that's just one aspect of policy which might be unpopular, but it's very important to push, and which you get the votes and support and financial support, even if a lot of people are very interested in the topic, like the extreme wing of the National Rifle Association, not the sellouts who are running it right now. Okay, that sort of thing. Okay, there are other aspects of this. I've already alluded to some of it in today's panel, this afternoon's panel. The whole drug program. Here's a beautiful example of tying in the war against drugs, of tying in civil liberties, personal freedom on one hand, and private property rights and economic freedom on the other. Because both of them are going down the tubes as a result of a totally insane war against drugs, which is not going to win, hasn't won, not going to win, it's hopeless. And the result is, of course, to get the government in every aspect of our life. It's very much like Prohibition in the 1920s. It's outlawing liquor, and then shooting everybody who mobilizing resources of all government at every level to seek out liquor, pry it out, kill anybody who has a still, and all the rest of it. And it means also, of course, that it doesn't outlaw prohibition, doesn't outlaw liquor, it simply drives it underground and gets it lower quality. Of course, there's no quality control in the black market, and things prohibited. So you get people dying from methyl alcohol, the poison kind of alcohol, and things like that. You don't have Seagrams selling a brand name in an illegal situation. So And the whole thing is essentially a scam whereby, well, two things. One is a scam whereby the government is on the take. I mean, the reason why we're not going to repeal the war against drugs, we're not going to legalize it very soon, is the whole darn government is in on the take. I mean, from the feds to the police to the Drug Enforcement Administration, all the rest of it, and foreign dictators and everybody else. This whole vast network, a whole business of being in on the take because of the outlawry of drugs. Ron Paul made, I think, the best single statement of his campaign, which will come back to haunt the drug war people, because the media remembered it, is if the government can't even keep drugs out of their own prisons, how can they do it any place else? Everybody's in a cage and they still can't battle it. So, and the result of, in addition to not succeeding on the drug front, as a matter of fact, the drug addiction problem has increased in proportion to the amount of resources the government has put into fighting it. In addition to all that, of course, they're using it in order to tyrannize over everybody's financial records, over everybody's bank account. You can't use cash. You use cash. Hey, you got a wad of cash. That means you're a drug dealer. Why else would you use cash? Why else would you use the beloved government banks? Okay, so this is a move towards a method of moving towards exchange control and trying to outlaw cash and all the rest of it. And nobody has, and people, and Ron Paul would meet media people and so forth, and government officials, even they admit this. They admit it doesn't work. They admit, and they still, of course, have to be publicly committed to the so-called war. Eventually, it's got to crack. I mean, what proportion of the gross national product we have to invest in the drug fight until the whole thing is seen as hopeless? I mean, 50%, half of the GNP going into the drug war. I mean, whatever it is, the whole thing is ridiculous. Okay, so we can be in the forefront on the drug question, which we have been. I think we've done that. We could keep accelerating this. As an example, by the way, to get more toward economic questions, as an example of what I mean by uniting with a part of the public that hates the establishment and hates the government. I happen to live in California, the glorious summer of 1978, when Proposition 13 was passed. And it was a magnificent thing to see because everybody was against it. Everybody hated it. It's a terrible thing. It will destroy the state government. There won't be any police anymore if you pass this big tax cut, property tax cut. There won't be any schools. There won't be any firemen. The roads will decay. And none of it worked. I mean, the whole big business, big unions, big government, our beloved teachers' unions, the whole group weighed in. The press, the media, TV, everybody attacked it. Irresponsible. How can these people be so irresponsible in favor of cutting the property taxes by 2/3, a terrible thing? And as the thing built, as the hysteria mounted, the polls began to record that Proposition 13 was getting more and more support. It's a beautiful thing. And at the end, it of course swept the victory, but no establishment support whatsoever. 2 or 3 economists, and that was about it. And as I say, it was a glorious thing to see, and if it could happen then, it could happen another time too. Of course, that was the heyday of anti-government sentiment in the United States so far, which was the late 70s, before the Reagan administration came in and co-opted the whole movement. But it can happen again, because I think one of the glorious things about what's happening since President Bush got in, with 8 years of the Reagan miasma being lifted at long last, and the sort of narcosis or whatever, the Reagan smile and the head shaking and all the rest of this. People begin to see reality once more. And what happens as soon as Bush is hardly in office? And suddenly what happens? There's the SNL crisis, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and Secretary of Treasury Brady comes out with a brilliant idea. The way to save the SNLs and pay off the depositors is increase, tax the deposits, bank deposits. Small tax, only 25 cents for every $100. What is it? The public won't care. By the way, here's, I think, a problem with the public choice people. They would say, also, the public wouldn't care. It's a small amount. The costs are spread over many people, teeny amount. It was a magnificent, it was a wonderful thing. One of the greatest things that's happened in American politics in my memory, namely a firestorm of hatred, rose up, and in three hours the whole proposition was dead. In 3 or 4 hours, it was great because it was advanced at 10 o'clock in the morning one day, whatever it was, and by 3 o'clock. This crossfire, whatever was on, it says dead, it's finished. I mean, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't make any difference. It's finished. It's idiotic. Stop. That's it. It's out. So what a magnificent thing. It's just beautiful. It reminded me, of course, in the early 80s, even the high day of the honeymoon, they tried to put them withholding tax, remember, on interest and dividends. That was killed also. This is a great reversion of that. Okay, the second step, which happened shortly thereafter, which is sort of like a 1-2 step of the establishment, was the congressional pay raise scam. I'm sure you all remember that. One of the beautiful things in American politics. Not organized by the Libertarian Party. It caught us by surprise. and they have this whole thing rigged, so you have the so-called bipartisan commission of beloved people. I use the term beloved, by the way, if you're not familiar with this, by people who are beloved by the right-thinking people. New York Times, CBS, Washington Post. And one of the most beloved people in 20th century America was Lloyd Cutler, who was the chairman of this bipartisan commission. And Cutler, in his wisdom, as a long-time lobbyist of the public trough, of course, came to the conclusion that we need a 50% pay raise for congressmen and for top bureaucrats with judges and everything else. It's desperately needed, otherwise we'll lose these great people. We'll lose them. Pay them now. It wasn't a grabber. And the thing is, and the revolution against, there was a revolution against the pay raise, was organized by radio talk show hosts, a heroic group. Because the TV is sort of locked up, and you watch TV, you watch Donahue and all these other creeps. And the radio talk show hosts, whoever was sort of semi-libertarian or whatever, they rose up as one man practically and had this whole network across the country, send tea bags to the congressmen protesting against this rotten. How dare they? See, the point is the moral indignation again. How dare these SOBs vote themselves a pay increase at our expense? Very simple and very effective. In the 19th century, anytime Congress voted itself a pay raise, even $100 a year, they were thrown out of the next election, just like that. How dare these people do that? Okay, so the same spirit rose up. It's not dead in America. And tea bags were sent to all these people, and even White Sulphur Springs, Greenbrier, or whatever, the Democratic congressman or national committee, whatever, met, and the conclave, and all of a sudden they're dead using tea bags and tickets. And it worked. It worked. That's the great thing about it, because the one thing about Congress, I mean, we complain about a lot about Congress, of course, but one thing about them, they have to come up for re-election pretty often, so they're sensitive to public protest and pressure. That's the point. It's not the idea of begging these people. It's put pressure on them. Look, you and you so-and-so, if you vote against me for the pay raise, you're out. You're finished. And so it worked. We beat it. And it's just a great thing. It's magnificent. Despite all the establishment, despite all the hokey arguments, we'll lose these great people. Of course, nobody quit. I mean, nobody. It's one of Rothbard's laws. I have a bunch of sociological laws. One of them is nobody ever resigns. And once in a while, of course, it's very rare. Okay, so these are heartening signs. These are signs that things are breaking loose again in the United States as they were before the Reagan administration. Okay, let's get to the SNL bailout, because I think that's a very interesting example of a situation where only a radical approach works. Only a radical approach is consistent. Because the gradual approach, which is taken by almost all think tanks, we heard about free market think tanks today, almost all the free market think tanks say, well, of course we have to bail out the depositors. So it's a government guarantee, you have to bail them out, and then you try to reform them. Now the reforms are pretty picky even to begin with. I don't want to talk about that right at this moment. I want to talk about the bailout. Nobody knows how much the bailout is going to be. I mean, the estimate keeps rising about $20 billion every month or so. It started last year about $20 billion. It's now up to about 120 or 200 or whatever. Who knows? Because the thing is, the SNLs, a third of them are officially insolvent, and the rest of them, as far as I'm concerned, are philosophically insolvent. So it's a question of when does the reality catch up with the philosophy? It can happen any time. I think there's about $8 billion a month being withdrawn by shrewd people. Let's get out of this stuff. It seems to be collapsing around us. Let's get out and go into other things, money market funds or whatever. This is going to accelerate as the collapse accelerates. It could easily happen. So the government guarantee is very interesting because the government, this is part of the running debate in the Libertarian Party for many years over public debt. Those of us who are radicals in favor of repudiating the debt, so the answer is, gee, it's a contract. Who made the contract? The contract is made by the government with people who want to live off tax loot for the next 20 years. I don't consider that a valid libertarian contract. It's sort of like a mafia contract. You and you get together, we shoot that guy over there. So think of what was interestingly enough, the question of how the SNLs will be bailed out. Everybody except maybe Mises Institute and one or two other groups are in favor of the bailout. Then the question is, how do you arrange the bailout? Well, you can the establishment says, well, half of it will be paid by taxpayers, or it won't be a tax though, of course, like the other tax on deposit was not a tax. That was supposed to be a fee. This is one of the ways President Bush fulfills his pledge of no new taxes. You don't call it a tax. Tax is a bad word. Nobody likes taxes anymore. So you use the word fee. In this case, it would be an insurance premium. You raise the insurance premium on the other banks to pay off the unsound banks, which of course pushes up various marginal banks into unsoundness, you understand. That's one way. That's half the bailout funds are supposed to come from there. The other half will come from borrowing. Well, how do you, $50 billion is the estimate. It'll be a lot more than that, I can assure you, before the thing is over. Another question is, how do you meet the Graham-Rudman limits on deficits, which is supposed to be moving down towards zero on the budget deficit question? Well, you do it by very simple device. You just don't include it in the budget. It becomes an off-budget item. See, one great way to balance the budget is not include spending in the budget. I wish I could do that. It's an off-budget item. Or you create a phony new outfit called a Resolution Finance Corporation, something like that. And they'd float the bonds, and they wouldn't be officially part of the government, so it doesn't really count. One interesting thing is the third method, you see, which they don't mention, the way they could really pay off the depositors is very simple. Seems very simple. This is really, of course, the foundation of the Fed power. Is to just print money and pay the people with it. Print the currency and give it to them. Why don't they do that? Why don't they print $200 billion and give it to the depositors and write the whole thing off? They could do it. There's no law against it. They've got the unlimited power to counterfeit, which is the Fed. The reason they don't do it is kind of interesting, because if they do it, it'd be super, hooper, duper inflationary, because people would then deposit the cash in various banks, and there'd be a 10-to-1 increase in the money supply, like that. A couple of $1 trillion increase in the money supply. They don't want to do that. They don't want to acknowledge there's a problem here. There's fractional reserve banking to begin with, so they don't talk about it. So at any rate, what would happen if, this seems like a hard situation, the depositors will go through the ringer indeed, take that radical stance. However, look at the great thing about it. If you allow the savings and loan banks to go bankrupt and allow the depositors to take the bath, one, it would relieve the taxpayers of $200 billion or more of new taxes or new inflation, or however they're going to hugger mugger this. And two, our beloved depositors and savings and loan people will learn a valuable and instructive lesson. Namely, never trust the government again. It's very similar to the foreign debt question. If there's foreign debt piling up in Brazil and Argentina and other places, what to do about it? What to do about it? Just don't write it off. Okay? Which means the Brazilian taxpayers don't have to be fleeced some more, the American taxpayers don't have to be fleeced some more, and the banks will finally engage in some honest accounting, which means they'll go under. So this is, the thing, it's a radical line, but it's a cleansing kind of thing. It's honesty applied to American politics for the first time in a long, long time. We had the same opportunity, by the way, to get rid of unsound banking during 1933 and the Great Depression. The banks were going under. They were collapsing as we spoke. And but we had two alternatives then. One is the alternative to allow them to go bust, and that's it. We go back to the hard gold currency. Forget about paper money and fractional reserve banking. The other route was taken, of course, by Roosevelt, and would have been taken by Hoover, which is, of course, to save the banks, go on to a paper finance standard and all the rest of it, have guaranteed deposits and all the rest of it. Now, some of my close friends are in favor of eliminating the FDIC government insurance and substituting private insurance, okay? Privately financed deposit insurance. Well, I'm not against it. I mean, if you want, it's like an entrepreneurial point. If you want to set up a private deposit insurance corporation, you're free to do it. Just you undoubtedly go bust. Remember what happened to the Ohio and Maryland private deposit insurance firms a few years ago? One bank was a crooked bank, and that went under. And immediately, all the other banks, people got scared, and the bank run occurred. The bank run, by the way, is a beautiful and magnificent institution, so like spread like that. And once it spreads, nothing can be done about it. And I think That's an instructive lesson because the banking system is the only industry in the United States I know of which rests only on public confidence. You know, they always talk about, hey, we can't tell the public that S&Ls are collapsing because it would ruin the confidence of the public. You don't see that applied any place else. Nobody talks about the importance of confidence in the computer industry or confidence in the TV industry. They've got TVs to sell, right? They've got computers, which are good, and they work. Confidence rests on the soundness of the product, not on flim-flam and smoke and mirrors, which it does in the fractional reserve banking system. That's why confidence is all important, because they ain't got the money there, folks. They ain't got the money. Now, there's a dispute among my friends about whether the public thinks that their money is there in the banks. I mean, take a poll, I think they all think it's there. I mean, even my students after a semester of brainwashing still really believe it's there. So they think the money is there. They don't think it's being loaned out somewhere and it ain't there. So anyway, that's, I think, again, an instructive lesson which should be learned. To me, the idea of insuring the fractional reserve banking system, or insuring the S&L, is very much like insuring the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. No percentage. You're free in the free market to do it, but there ain't much percentage in it. Okay, so, by the way, free enterprise, it seems to me, I'm getting kind of irritated at the idea that if you're a small firm, if you own a restaurant or whatever, you're allowed to go under. If you're a big business, if you're Continental Illinois Bank, or if you're Lockheed or Chrysler or the S&L industry, you can't be allowed to go under. You're bailed out automatically by the government. It seems to me that free enterprise means freedom to choose, and also therefore means freedom to lose, and for the big guys as well as the small ones. Okay. Okay, I think if I haven't succeeded in alienating everybody yet, I may as well deal with two more points on the current policies and current issues. One is a thing which irritates me a lot. I don't see much opposition to it, either in the libertarian movement or free market economists. I'm not saying it's not there, just don't see it. It might be there bubbling underground and I haven't seen it yet. Anyway, we've had in the last few years a veritable reign of terror on Wall Street. Many of us have our least favorite politician. It's very difficult. When I think about my least favorite politician, it's very difficult to decide among a rich tapestry of choices. If you focus on this guy, yeah, he's the least favorite. You focus on somebody else, yeah, he's the one. But my particular favorite is Rudolph Giuliani, the heroic Savonarola of Wall Street. Okay?
Hitler.
The scourge, yes, the scourge of Wall Street. And Giuliani is, as you probably know, he'll probably be the mayor of New York soon. And his big thing is using the power of the state apparatus, including all quasi-illegal means, certainly unlibertarian means, to what? To combat the evils on Wall Street. What are the evils on Wall Street? Well, things like insider trading, which as far as I'm concerned means if you talk over a martini, you say, gee, Jim, I know that so-and-so's XYZ Corporation is going to merge with ABC Corporation. You're arrested. It's illegal. Somebody's spying on you. It's inside trading evil. Lock them up. And the idea that somehow an unfair advantage if you know something more than the other guy and therefore profit from it, that's what free enterprise is. It's knowing something more than the other guy and being an entrepreneur and profiting from it, whether it's the stock market or business in general. This is a direct assault on free markets, and free enterprise, and private property, and all the rest of it. It's a victimless crime, just as much as prostitution and drugs. It's a victimless crime. It also helps the economy by siphoning control and ownership of assets of corporations to the most efficient people, those who know more than the other clucks. Okay, and for this they are persecuted. Two prominent investment bankers were dragged out of their office in manacles and chains by Giuliani's thugs. And what does the public say about it? I mean, usually I'm optimistic about the public, but not in this sort of situation. They don't understand it. They're good when something taps their pocketbook, like a pay raise or something like that. They don't understand that. Something on Wall Street, they're all for it. Yeah, these guys. One of my least favorite news things on television is the man on the street interviews. I don't know whether it's the real man on the street or whether they select it that way. A bunch of bozos from beginning to end. And when they arrested some of these Wall Street insider traders, they asked these guys, "What do you think?" I think the Ivan Boesky case. What do you think of the Boesky punishment? It's too good for him. There's $1 billion fine and then 5 years in jail and prohibiting him from ever trading in security again. Too good for him. They should lock him up and throw away the key. This seemed to be the modal argument, the modal opinion of the man on the street. And if you talk about the civil liberties or property rights of Wall Street people, it seems, they're rich, who cares about their rights? I think it's extremely important for us to get into this. To me, one of the most interesting aspects of this was the New York Times headline. New York Times always tries to be very objective in their headlines and their reporting. But this time they weren't very objective, even by New York Times standards. And the big headline was something like this. I wish I could remember the exact quote. On the financial page yet, which is even more neutral than the other parts of it, it was something like this. Income so big that even Wall Street can't stomach. That was the headline. And the income referred to Michael Milken, indicted for $1 billion fine, 550 years in jail, whatever the penalties are, for the crime of inside trading, plus takeover bids and all that, which I'll get into in a little bit. And the comments about Milken's $550 million a year income, okay? 3 people in particular, the New York Times quoted as attacking this bitterly. It's too much, it's monstrous, so on and so on. One was, of course, our old buddy, John Kenneth Galbraith, who you can expect that from Galbraith, all right? Galbraith was made millions by attacking everybody else's affluence. That's his contribution to social life. The other was Donald J. Trump, with all the nerve saying, you can be happy on less money than that. What gall, what chutzpah. And third was none other than our old buddy who practically runs the country, David Rockefeller, who says, if somebody can make that much money, it shows there's a serious imbalance in our financial system. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a situation, I think basically what we're really looking at is the old corporate elite, which was inefficient, which has been shafting the stockholders for a long time, suddenly finds a system whereby people like Milken can finance takeover bids and get the corporation out from under inefficient elites and onto new and better owners. And so who pay stockholders more money. That's really what it's all about. People like Rockefeller are almost the embodiment of the old-fashioned corporate elite. So there's another factor here, too, which Mises pointed out years ago, namely, very rich people tend to be in favor of progressive income tax. You wouldn't think of that. But very rich people essentially live off inheritance, off inherited wealth. They don't like new upstarts coming up with labor income, which is what Milken's income was, of course. It was a percentage of commission of income he got for the firm. So you have a war between the old-fashioned inherited wealth and people coming up on the outside, fast on the outside, doing better things. Actually, the whole Milken point was made possible by the Williams Act, the nefarious Williams Act in 1967, when the corporate elites were being hit by takeover bids so that people could get stockholders together and offer them higher money, more money than they're getting now per share. It was outlawed by the Williams Act. And the Williams Act cracked down on takeover bids and ordered, as soon as you amass 5% of any corporate stock, you have to go public, you have to announce it, and announce your intention to have an eventual takeover and wait a certain time period to do it. This, of course, meant opportunities for arbitrage and all the rest of it. And what Milken did was a tremendous financial innovator to get around, by takeover, by leverage buyouts, to get around, and so-called junk bonds, to get around this prohibition. The Williams Act was passed by the beloved Senator Williams, who was then beloved, not now. The so-called education senator is always filling a congressional record with pleas for more government money in education. We got caught on the amp scam affair, got tossed into the hoosgow, Senator Williams. And the takeover and the financing these bids by high yield, but really should be called high yield bonds. They're called junk bonds by the competitors, whose bonds should be called low yield bonds. Okay? If you want to be technical. Obviously, a higher yield bond would be riskier. I mean, everybody knows that. But at any rate, the bankers who were floating the low yield bonds, of course, didn't like the fact that Milken was competing with them, and very successfully. So you have these various interests trying to crush their competition and using the government to do it, and using phony moral arguments to try to do it, and apparently fairly successfully at this point. My final, to say if I haven't succeeded in alienating everybody yet, my final example here of a current issue, which I think almost everybody is wrong on, which I think libertarians should sail into, is the Alaska oil spill. I'm sure you're all familiar with. I couldn't see anything on TV. TV news are getting to the point, all you get is medical news, and once in a while you get something of the Alaskan oil spill. I mean, I've now intimately familiar with every study and report that's been done on cancer and heart disease and 20 other obscure diseases now, just from watching a regular news program. At any rate, here you have the oil spill. Okay, who's blamed for the oil spill? Exxon. It seems to me Exxon is precisely the people we should feel sorry for. Exxon loses 10 million gallons of oil, which is approximately $5 million, plus the money they have to pay, and I think correctly so, the people who lost that because of the oil spill, the fishermen, and all the rest of it. Okay, so Exxon are the losers, allegedly from allegedly drunken sea captain. Okay, and yet Exxon is being boycotted, constantly attacked, etc., etc. And if you look at what we're suffering from is essentially environmentalist infection here, because if you look at the environmentalist propaganda here, what they're saying is it's a terrible. They're not talking about really about the fishermen. They're talking about the otters. They're talking about the water. In fact, the water is no longer blue. It's now white or whatever. It's now black or brown because of the oil. So in other words, but it used to be the rights of the snail dog become greater than the rights of human beings, or the rights of the caribou, or whatever. Now it's the rights of the water. The natural right of the water to remain pristine. It seems to me totally idiotic. But that's the language in which this is couched. Exxon did not deliberately dump the oil. They're the ones who lost from it. And the thing is, the economists who say, well, we can fix up this problem by internalizing the externality, by forcing, say, Exxon to pay damage. They're doing that anyway. That's not really the problem. It's much deeper than that. The last big was the anarcho-capitalist tanker off the coast of France about 1979, I think. And I don't think there was any big fuss made about it at all. It was much bigger. It was about 60 million gallons. Nobody complained. There was nothing big on television about it. They paid, I think Amoco paid about $500 million for liability. That was it. There was no big thing. Nobody boycotted Amoco and all the rest of it. And I think this is an example of the extent to which environmentalism has spread in the last intervening decade. And I think what we have with the oil pipeline, which they're trying, of course, to shut down, the big argument against it was, for many years, which held up the development, was the fact that the caribou migratory patterns would be disturbed. The caribou's got lots of land up there in Alaska. There's tundra, huge amount of land. There's lots of land to walk around in, but the projection was the caribou would be disturbed by the pipeline. Well, they built the pipeline. It turns out the caribou loved it, because it's nice and warm. And they literally snuggle up to the pipeline for a nice warmth. So we have a group of people which have not been explored enough, I think. An environmentalist movement is essentially an anti-human movement. It's a movement which wants to roll back the Industrial Revolution, wants to go back to the primitive period when man and nature were allegedly in balance, which means, of course, wiping out about 95% of the human race. And elevating the alleged rights of animals, insects, fish, water, mountains, everything except people. Those of us who take this position are called speciesists. I prefer to call it humanist. The human beings being the prime priority here. I've been writing some anti-environmentalist articles in Liberty magazine, and the last couple of weeks ago, the august chairman of the august New Jersey Libertarian Party called up the head of the Center for Libertarian Studies and demanded that he fire me as the editor of the Journal of Libertarian Studies for daring to attack environmentalism. So my friend, who's the head of the center, said it seems to be a lot easier for him to fire himself as a subscriber. Nobody's forcing him to subscribe to the journal. So that sort of stuff, I think, has to be tackled, because whereas socialism, as I mentioned this afternoon, is collapsed. I mean, it's imploded, it's collapsed. Nobody's a socialist anymore. But we have a rise in various other forms of interventionism, in particular environmentalism and other egalitarianism and other measures, hatred of the rich and things like that, which still persist. So there's lots of work for us to do, but I think the climate has gotten a lot, political climate has gotten a lot better with the retirement of Reagan to his ranch in Santa Barbara. We now have a much more flexible and open political system where you have a chance to move, and I hope we do it. Thank you very much. Questions, comments, whatever?
What's your opinion of government experimentation on the American public without the American public knowing it?
Well, I suppose I'm against that. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but yeah.
Well, okay, like for
Right.
instance, I don't know, I was mentioning at the table here during dinner that the American public was injected with a AIDS, I guess, a virus, and we're all carrying the AIDS virus around with us, and it was a government experimentation back then, and how we all got this AIDS virus within our bodies was back in 1962 when the government was giving all these free polio injections, that they had the AIDS virus within this injection of the polio. So we're all carrying the AIDS virus. The only problem is that they're not sure how the AIDS virus spread to where it's out of control today.
I never heard of that. I don't know anything about that.
It sounds far out.
Yeah, it's that far. Yeah, I can see any evidence to that effect. I'm not. My favorite story about the government medicine was the swine flu caper. If you remember, if anyone remembers that. I mean, that was documented, and during the Ford administration, I believe, Ford was desperately anxious to get reelected. It didn't look as if he was going to, and discovered the great swine flu menace, and insisted everybody get injected with this virus. There's no authentic cases of swine flu had been recorded, and they're desperately anxious to try to find somebody with swine flu so they can justify the program. They finally found some guy, I think in northern Michigan or Minnesota or something. It turned out, however, he was a pig farmer. He actually got it from swine. That didn't count. So they never really found anybody. In the meantime, they kept injecting people with this stuff, and then people were getting paralyzed from it and dying from it at a fairly hefty rate. And my favorite story, being a New Yorker at the time, being steeped in New York politics and social life, the head of the top mafia family in New York, the sainted Carlo Gambino, I believe, was pretty old then, and his assistant, his top assistant, insisted Godfather, you must go get the swine flu virus injection. And he finally did. He tottered off and got it and died the next day. And his helpful assistant was Carmine Galante, was a secret member of the other competing family, then took over as head of the mafia. That was one great story. And the other, not really a story, but was that I was talking to my class in American economic history about the current situation at the time. And at that point, Nelson Rockefeller was the vice president. And that morning, I think President Ford, to show the greatness and the safety of the virus, the shot, got himself injected. So one of my students popped up and said, well, if Ford dies tomorrow morning and Rockefeller becomes president, that would vindicate a conspiracy analysis. It didn't happen, anyway. Yeah.
Right. Back some years there was a counter-intel program of government spying on groups in the country.
Right.
Do you have any comments about any current government monitoring of various political groups, say libertarians?
I have no idea. I'm not privy. I mean, people ask me these arcane questions about American intelligence. I don't really know. I know that the LP was spied upon in the early founding couple of years. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. About 5 people in the party, and one of them must have been a government agent because they reported in great detail about this guy said, well, that guy said it. And I think a particularly scary period. One of the first libertarian meetings in the current period was in 1969. Fall of 69, I believe. And I was putting out the Libertarian Forum at the time in New York. We were getting, my friend Joe Peden was a publisher, said, oh, we seem to be getting a lot of people here. Let's have a supper club, go to a Chinese restaurant and have supper club. We thought we'd get about 20 people. We sent sort of a mailing out. We got 80 people. Who are these people? What new libertarians or whatever, I suppose. But anyway, the interesting thing is, one of our libertarians at Fordham was the friend of the guy who was the head of the YAF chapter at Fordham at the time. And somebody would give a paper, a scholarly paper on freedom and the French Revolution, whatever it is. The next morning, it was Saturday night, the next morning, this YAF guy knew the whole context. That was the cops who were there reporting on it. This guy gets a copy and says the YAF was in with the cops. He gets a report. So-and-so spoke, they said such and such in the comments. I mean, can you imagine the peculiarity of this thing? It's a crummy little group, and we're a mighty movement compared to what we were in 1969. 20 people, and giving papers, and the cops were there. You know, they were spying on us and reporting it, and the taxpayers were paying for this crap. So I don't know what's going on now, but I do know that was going on then. And there was a whole, I can tell a story at length on that. But anyway, that was the Nixon administration, I believe. Nixon was going bananas, and the new left was going bananas. Everything was, yeah. Virginia.
From an interventionist foreign policy standpoint, as a historian, you respond when people say the Americans would never have won the Revolutionary War without the help of the French.
I think we would have. I think that French aid was certainly beneficial, but I think it was an largely internal question, and it was. I think it was the basic. Majority of the public definitely supported it. There were different states where that wasn't true, but basically, it was an successful internal revolution. Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd ever addressed a free market alternative to saving the environment. You were talking last, you mentioned the environment possibly as not being the important issue, but of course in bottom analysis it still is important to a lot of people, so I was just wondering.
Well, I mean, there's the standard private property argument, which I think is correct. I mean, there's the standard. I do have some friends who are libertarian environmentalists, and they have all sorts of ingenious plans, which are undoubtedly correct. If you want to save the turtle or whatever it is, I don't care about saving these things. But if you care about saving the species sub 28 of the turtle, you buy the damn thing and preserve it. You know, you have a breeding ground, you preserve it. And some environmentalist groups are doing that. They buy a plot of land, they save species. Okay, I'm certainly not against it. I wouldn't contribute a lot of money to it. That's different strokes for different folks. Other things like pollution is an important question, but there you have to prove it. You have to sort of show there's pollution going on, what the effect is before you can start using the power of the government upon them. And a lot of the stuff seems to be very vague. Somebody's doing something, and it's like the rainforest in Brazil. Somehow the poor Brazilians get in the neck. Everybody else can develop and chop down forests. When it comes to the Brazilians doing it, everybody gets hysterical about it. It's not persuasive to me. I think the Brazilians have a good argument. Why can't we develop? Why can't we cut down these damn forests? Right? So, also I'm not persuaded why the temperature of the Earth can't rise by 2 degrees in 20 years or 50 years, and what's the matter with that? There's no optimal temperature which we have to fix and somehow use the government to stop increases or decreases. So anyway, I think most of it is off the wall.
Well, I've noticed there was a number of organizations that have shown that they can save the environment at a profit, like whale watching.
Yeah, sure.
There's rainforests in Central America where they're taking people through and charging them to go through.
Great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Sure. The best example of that is my late Anthony Fisher, the big English free market, the founder of about 24 free market institutes, and he invested in the turtle breeding grounds somewhere in the Caribbean. And the thing apparently about turtles, I'm not a natural scientist. I'm working on shaky ground. I'm not a turtle maven, but anyway, the turtles apparently there's a high death rate for turtles. They're spawned on the beach. There's a big beach, and they have to walk or crawl to the water, right, to be saved. And on the way, which is a long 500 yards or something, they're eaten, killed, not by evil man, but by other species, birds, whatever, okay, raccoons, whatever's going on down there. So anyway, these turtles were dying at a hefty rate. So Fisher bred the turtles. He bred turtles, kept the predators out, put a net over it, whatever he did, increased the turtle population enormously, and of course killed some of the turtles, and sold the turtle soup to the United States, right? But there's a net tremendous increase in turtles. So the environmentalists immediately got hysterical about this. They're killing turtles. So they banned the importation of turtles from the West Indies or whatever, and of course it put them out of business, which means the turtles are back dying, getting killed by birds. I don't know why it's better for birds to kill them than people. So that's the sort of thing that goes on a lot. Yeah.
The Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement seems to, in terms of membership, and funding, and vote, seems to have been basically a plateau in this decade.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be any significant growth in the next 10 or 20 years, and what do you think it'll take for that to happen?
If you look at the Libertarian Party, it was growing. It was founded in 1971. It grew phenomenally until 1980, almost an exponential rate. Then bingo, we're hit. And I don't think it's an accident that it was growing at the same time as anti-government sentiment in general in the United States, anti-tax sentiment, anti-inflation sentiment, and anti-Watergate. The whole Watergate thing came in, discrediting the presidency, and all that, and Vietnam, also the Vietnam War. It all came in about the same time, in the mid-70s. So you had a tremendous revulsion against government. But what happens in 1980, enters Ronald Reagan. He had the honeyed voice and the head shaking and all the rest of it. So Reagan, using libertarian rhetoric and doing exactly the opposite, fooled a large number of people. And so that kills 8 years. I mean, I think we did great by being on a plateau. I'm surprised we didn't collapse altogether. Now that Reagan I really place a great emphasis on Reagan. Reagan, I don't think is a replicable phenomenon. I think they can find anybody who's like that, who's a beloved actor, knows all the tricks of the trade and all that sort of stuff. So, given that, I don't see that the state will be beloved again. And he restored. He realized what happened to the presidency. He realized the magnificence of the fact that Nixon was really impeached. I mean, before Watergate, the talk of impeachment, which of course is straight constitutional advice, was unthinkable. Couldn't talk about impeachment. You were a nut if you talked about impeachment. When Nixon came in, he was impeached. In fact, he resigned before they could actually kick him out. But he was impeached. It was a great thing. It was a great step forward in American history. And finally, an impeachment of the president. So, and with Carter, first when Carter got out, I was afraid that Cardigan's sweater would sweep people off their feet, but didn't happen. He sank without a trace. And when Reagan comes in, it reestablishes the love of the people of the president, the sovereignty of the president, and all that sort of stuff. So I think with Reagan out of the picture, this is not going to happen anymore. I mean, Bush has a high approval rating, but I don't think it means much because he isn't beloved in the same way. He isn't magic, whatever it is. Because I don't understand it, because I'm not looking caught up by it. Okay? But he hasn't got it. And so I think we're now going to be back to a normal political scene with people rising up in hatred of the government. And so my prognosis is great. Yeah. So
I think there were a few of us who were surprised, to say the least, that your advocacy of Ron Paul for our party candidate in the last election. I wonder if you have any thoughts about it, if you intend to get involved in the '92 campaign, if you have anybody in mind, or
I'm always involved in every campaign. I haven't got anybody in mind particularly now. With whoever comes forth and the best. I think it's certain. I think a candidate should be a credible candidate. Should be somebody who the American public can identify with as a political leader. Somebody who might be conceivable as a president. See, that's my problem with nominating people who are obviously not president. There's no word as president obile. It's like popile, the pope. Somebody who's a credible papal candidate. So I think we should put up somebody who the American public would look at as a possible credible candidate, like Dick Jacobs, out-debated. What's Regal? That sort of stuff. Somebody who could out-debate the establishment. If Ron Paul could knock the socks off of Bush. Pretty clear. So I mean that sort of thing. The two, I think, is you should have somebody who can raise money. You need money for a presidential campaign, and Ron had the ability to do that. So I think that, and somebody who's a pure libertarian, not going to waffle or sell out, which I think is also true. I think there were mistakes in his campaign, but I mean that's should be corrected. But for the future presidential nominee, yeah.
What do you think the Hans Hoppe philosophical proof on property rights is going to have on the intellectual movement of the libertarians?
Well, since it just came out, sort of, it seems to be having a big impact right now. It's a bestseller. I think the first printing sold out from laissez-faire books. And what the Hoppe position is, it cuts through the natural rights versus utilitarian argument by establishing a value-free, without establishing an ethical system, establishing a value-free libertarian ethic, a hardcore, totally hardcore ethic. And he does it by taking an Aristotelian version of Kantianism, which is prominent in Germany, extrapolating into economics and politics. So I think it's great. I think it will have a lot of influence. I think it already has. Of course, most of the people who originally reviewed it didn't understand it, and that's inevitable. Something really brand new. But I think it's going to have a big impact. Yeah, back there, lady, back there in the wall.
Yeah, earlier you said that libertarians should work with people who already hate government.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm an environmentalist, and I can't think of a group that hates the government more because we learned under Ron Reagan.
Okay.
The government
Right.
taking care of us.
Right.
I'm also very pro-human.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Good.
you're making a very incorrect assumption assuming that all we're working towards plans for humans. I think I'm very much working towards, taking care of my own health, my children's health,
I'm in favor. I mean, those who are interested in environmentalism, there are plenty of pro-environmentalist libertarians who can work on bringing them to the fold. It's not I don't consider my function. But at any rate, I'm certainly not against it. I mean, I've read. I urge you to rethink the thing too. The environmentalist literature that I've read is explicitly anti-human. I mean, basically, they start off by saying that before people arrived, everything was great. There was a balance of nature. Everything was, the environment was all balanced. The species were balanced. And then man comes along and screws everything up. Man is linear instead of being this beautiful circle. And man changes the environment, dominates it. It's a terrible thing. That seems to be the basic philosophical environmentalist position for a long time now. It's the stuff I've read. So that, if you take a moderate position and you're not anti-human, great. It seems to me that's the fundamental basis, because when the push comes to shove, when it's us versus the snail daughter, or us versus the caribou, it's always them all the time, not us. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, Greg?
How do you explain the continuing popularity of Paul Johnson in certain intellectual circles? Paul Johnson,
Yeah.
modern times.
Right.
How do you explain this continuing popularity?
Well, I think there's some merit. I think modern times has a certain amount of merit. He adopts the Austrian Great Depression. It's conspicuous merit. But I think basically Paul Johnson is part of the international, really Anglo-American neocon movement, neoconservative movement. I'm not a big fan of the neoconservative movement. In fact, I think they're endangered both the old-fashioned conservatism and anti-libertarianism. Basically, neocons are statists, and they're basically, the position they take, they're very smart. They have a lot of media influence through the Wall Street Journal, Irving Kristol, and so forth, and Jack Kemp. And basically, their position is they want a more efficient welfare state. They want a welfare state after pre-McGovern, pre-1967. They're in favor of the New Deal, in favor of the Fair Deal. They love Hubert Humphrey and all that stuff. And they only stop with McGovern and post-McGovern. That's not good enough for me. I'm against the New Deal from the very beginning, even the progressive movement, much less the deal. So they're collectivists. They believe in American imposition of collective might all over the world, pushing everybody around for the base for world democracy or whatever. And I think it's a very dangerous movement. And the English seem to be into this quite a bit. The English right wing is now almost all neocons, except for a few maverick types. So, and they have a huge amount of influence, much more than their numbers, even more than, somebody mentioned tonight, libertarians are more influential than their numbers. Neocons are even more so, enormously influential. There's very few actual people in it. But they have the levers of power, they're very smart, they have, mostly are ex-Marxists or ex-Trotskyites, and they know how to organize cadre work and get their people in the right, kick out their opponents and put their own people in. And so they've managed to be very successful that way. Yeah?
One of the biggest news stories of this past week was the conviction of Colin.
Conviction what? I can't hear.
One of the biggest news stories this past week was the Colin conviction.
Oh yeah, right.
I'd like to get your comments.
Well, my comment is that Oliver North is a properly convicted felon, no question about that. But that he received orders. He got orders from Reagan, presumably, possibly from Bush. And that question, where do you stand on people who are doing illegal things or carrying out government aggression under orders? And it's a very interesting philosophical point, and I personally don't think you should absolve them. I'm sick of the order stuff. And when the prosecutor, John Kecker, raised the Hitler point, I think he was making a good point. He was making the point that that was the Eichmann defense. He was just carrying out orders. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't a rogue elephant, a rogue cowboy, whatever you want to call it. And I think you have to apply the same sort of standards in the United States. To say that I've obeyed orders is not good enough. You can resign. Despite Rothbard's law, some people can. You have the freedom to get out of the government. So that's my position. It's essentially anti-North and anti-Reagan. By the way, North patriotic hokum to the extent he stand on his head for the president and all that sort of stuff. You notice when push came to shove and his neck was on the line, he didn't stand on the head for anything. He was subpoenaing Reagan, right? And trying to expose these so-called secret documents. So I don't see this nobility there either.
He took an oath.
Huh?
He took an oath to uphold the Constitution
Yeah,
himself.
that's
It's
right.
not, you can't rest it on anybody else.
Right, exactly. I think there's also very, very, very smart politics on the part of the prosecution to bring in a wounded Marine hero as a prosecutor, which offset the wounded Marine bit. Yeah, go over there.
What do you think about libertarians selling the idea of libertarianism, making it more palatable? And what I mean is, like, saying, instead of saying abolish the IRS or abolish the income tax, talk about the benefits that would come. Sometimes I think...
I thought you were going to say privatize the IRS. I got scared for a minute. No, we don't want an efficient IRS. No. Yeah. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is, a lot of times you hear Ron Paul or whoever speak right on national TV, they want to abolish this, and of course that raises questions that keep in mind. Instead of doing that, maybe explain the benefits that would come with getting rid of the income.
Well,
selling it.
Well, I think people understand the benefits. Don't they? I mean, it seems obvious to me that the benefits are negative. I mean, they get the money, they can keep the money they've earned. I mean, I don't see why it's difficult to sell them on this. They might think they're offsetting circumstances of some sort, but I try it. I'm not against doing that, but it seems to me we should also say we're in favor of abolishing IRS. In addition to the benefits which would flow when we get rid of it, sure. I mean, there's a positive and negative side to every coin. You know, it's like the welfare system. You want to abolish welfare for basically two reasons. You want to get these people off our neck, and you want to get rid of them being dependent and have a class of generation of welfare dependent. It's good for them, it's good for us. That's true. Well, both of these sides of the coin are correct. So which you push at any time is really up to you. It's up to the situation. Yeah?
Yes. Could you comment on the viability of privatizing the judicial system?
Viability. Well, it's being done right now. It's in California, in Los Angeles. The courts are so clogged up, inefficient and all that. They're turning to private judges, many of whom are retired, and arbitrating and that sort of stuff. And they're much more efficient, faster, and all the rest of it. Also, with the arbitration movement, you get judges who know what's going on. If you have a contract dispute or something like that about some arcane industry, what does some political know about the radio, TV channels or something? You get somebody who's an expert on the TV industry who can judge it, who's picked by both sides, and therefore will be, it's selling your services on the market. I think it's great. It's happening more and more. I mean, it's not just a theoretical point. Many of these things, by the way, are not just arcane points. They're happening all the time. Just where we don't put too brain clogged to see it. By the way, there's a great book coming out by Bruce Benson this summer. The title, I keep seeing different titles, something like Law and Justice. And what it is, he's an economist at Florida State. What it is a whole massive compendium of how private law, private courts, and private enforcement has been successful in primitive Indian tribes and pre-modern Europe and all the rest of it. A whole bunch of cases of that sort. It's a great book. So that's a look for it. Anyway, he has an article in Southern Economic Journal, this current issue on law merchant, how it developed in private merchant courts and then taken over and screwed up by the state. Excellent article. Yeah, back there.
Yes, Ayn Rand once said that one does not go about one's house dusting it if one's house is on fire. How do you see America's house? Smoldering, on fire, or has it already burned to the ground?
Well, it hasn't burned to the ground because we're still here. It's like all of history. It's a struggle between aggression and it's a trouble. The way Albert J. Nock put it, it's a struggle between state power and social power. By social power, he meant voluntary arrangements, market arrangements, voluntary scientific development, civilization, and all that. And state power, of course, is the state looting it, interfering with it, repressing it. And it's a contest between the two things. I think we're fairly in good shape, and there's some bad things and some good things. Back there?
Yeah, how do you see the current balance of trade deficit, and do you think there's anything to be said for protectionism?
There's nothing to be said for protection. I don't care a rap about the balance of trade deficit, and it doesn't exist anyway. There's no balance of payments deficit, right? There's no problem. The balance of trade deficit is, in other words, since there's no international reserve anymore, there's no reserve money, there's no gold standard, there's no problem, because there's no way, somebody's got to hold on. If we buy $200 billion worth of foreign goods, more than they buy from us, somebody's got to hold $200 billion worth of dollars somewhere. And what it is, of course, foreigners hold it. Foreign investors are investing in dollars, which means the dollar is much more higher value than it would be without it, which means they're financing cheap imports. It's great. As long as this lasts, it's terrific. There's nothing wrong with deficits. It's just like worrying about a deficit between Dearborn and Southfield or whatever. If there was a customs barrier between Dearborn and Southfield, between Las Vegas and Los Angeles or whatever, there'd be people griping about the deficit, because there'd be some sort of deficit. I mean, one or the other, there'd be more dollars crossing the border this way than that way, and people would gripe about it. My God, we have to have tariffs, we have to have government intervention, and all this. It's all nonsense. There's no problem with the deficit. And the only reason is people think there's a problem because the word deficit is the same as in the government budget and the balance of trade. The fact that the word is the same means nothing. It's two totally different things. There's nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, statistics, the collection of statistics often creates problems in themselves. This is a beautiful example of it. That's it. Yeah.
Everybody seems to be running around tonight asking the solution to their own pet problem with libertarianism, so I'll ask mine.
Okay.
And that is, you as an economist, I think, must understand how the freedom of movement around the country is related to a system of roads.
Yeah.
That's one thing I don't really see a good libertarian solution.
What, private roads, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't see what the problem is. The English network of roads in the 18th century was all private. And turnpikes, toll roads, you can see that. Just as well have private collection of tolls as government. And then streets are going to be run all sorts of ways. All sorts of ways in which the street companies collect income.
So Broadway becomes a private vertical.
Well, I don't know. It depends on, yeah, I mean, it depends how the market would work it. I don't know what the unit of the technological unit would be. It has to be worked out by the market. It could be the whole of Manhattan, or it could be one neighborhood. There's all sorts of possibilities. Just we can't dictate it in advance. That's the whole thing about the market. You have to see what how the market develops the institution. But yeah, there'll be streets which are, and one way to do it, one way to finance it, by the way, is to have a sticker, you know, in your car. You buy a sticker which gives you the right to drive in certain, let's say in the rush hour period. You pay a market clearing price for the sticker, and this eliminates congestion in rush hour. A beautiful way of doing it. In New York City, there's two. First of all, they don't have much. Either they have zero fees or very low parking fees. They have big congestion. And then the mayor says we got to ban all private cars from New York, from Manhattan. So there's typical government in action. Either you subsidize something or you prohibit it. There's no concept. Maybe you can let the market do it. You know, have the market have private and competing private enterprise, and let them work out the pricing arrangement. It's the only rational way to do it anyway. It's only because we've been locked into a situation for a couple of centuries of government roads that we can't conceive of how it would work. It's very much as if, for some kind of customary historical reasons, the government is the sole monopoly producer of shoes. That's it. Everything else is free, but the government produces all the shoes. And if I came up and said, I think we should have a privately competitive shoe industry, and you could easily say, hey, that's a terrible thing. You want people to go unshod, and who would produce shoes? How many would they be? How many firms would there be? Who the hell knows? You wait, let the market rip, and let the market decide. That's the way to do it.
Very good. We get possibly two more questions.
Two more questions. Okay. Yeah, back there.
I'm sorry, I don't have a question, but I would like to remind everyone that there's something that they can do to advance their libertarian philosophy. And that's to get a hold of their Republican representatives and let them know how they feel about this gun control legislation. Because all of your rights hinge on your ability to bear firearms.
Okay, very good.
Talking about politicians,
Right.
I'm confused about Dana Rohrabacher. I thought he was a libertarian once. He just got elected. He's talking about Ollie North. He made a real pro-Ollie North comment the other day.
Right. Yeah, he was a libertarian. People can change their minds, of course. And he was not only was he a libertarian, interestingly enough, he was a Lefebvrean libertarian, which meant he was bitterly opposed to all political actions being invasive. He was bitterly opposed to even defensive violence, much less aggressive violence. He was a pure pacifist. And then he shifted over as soon as the job on the Reagan campaign team opened up. So that's, I don't know what, who knows? People change their mind. People defect from the Communist Party. People, they changed a lot, and he changed. The problem is to call him a libertarian in some sense. That's where I balk. The guy's now a Reaganite. Okay, so that's the position. And look at his voting record. It's Reaganite. His speech record and all the rest of it. So that's it. It happens from time to time. It's too bad, but it does happen.
Thank you, Murray.
Yeah. Okay.